Today we'll be installing a Polychoke 2 on a Saiga-12 gauge that's either longer than you wish or does not have muzzle threads. This happens to be a 2006 import that's 19 inches, already has muzzle threads on it, but we're just using it as a demonstration of what's going to happen. The shotgun that the Polychoke is getting installed on is actually a 2001 EAA import that had an integrated choke that I cut off pretty early, but today we'll be cutting the barrel from 19.5 inches down to 18.5 inches and threading it for the Polychoke. Some legal information. Just because you cut metal does not make a gun a sawed-off shotgun. It does not make a shotgun illegal. It is not illegal. The National Firearms Act defines a short-barreled shotgun as anything under 18 inches. So we'll be taking the gun in question, the shotgun in question, down to 18.5 just to be safe. Now that is measured from the bolt face to the forwardmost portion of the shotgun, the forwardmost hard surface on the shotgun. Now the Polychoke is actually two pieces. You can't install it and then have 18 inches at the end. You have to be, when everything is removed, at least 18 inches. Now the tools that you'll need for this, you'll need Polychoke 2, a metric 22 by 0.75 die, and a thread alignment tool. These three I got from Carolina Shooter Supply in South Carolina. You also need some sort of measuring rod. This is a standard cleaning rod for the Saiga. You'll need a hacksaw, bandsaw, or a lathe if you have one with a head big enough to take the barrel. I do have a lathe that does not have a head long enough to run the barrel through, so I'm going to be doing this the low-tech way that still brings quality results. You'll need a large flat file, a handle for the die, you'll need a pretty large one, some sandpaper, liquid blue, something to measure with. So to get started, the thread alignment tool is necessary to ensure that when the die starts, you're running it perfectly parallel to the barrel. It doesn't get off. When you start the die, you don't get off at a slight angle and cut the threads in properly. So it's very important. I've threaded things without them before. They're a lifesaver. Get it? It's not that expensive. The die is a split collar with a adjustment screw on it. That's important for this. This is one of the most expensive parts of this conversion. You can find these. They're hard to find in such a fine thread. You can find them on eBay, but most of the time what you find, they do not have the split collar, which is really necessary if you don't have a lathe to do this right. And if you're buying the die, chances are you don't have a lathe because you can cut the threads on the lathe without it. So the first thing we're going to want to do is measure the barrel to the bolt face and decide how long do you want the barrel. In this case, like I said, I went to 18.5 inches. That's close enough to the legal limit to make me feel comfortable. So we're going to take the cleaning rod and, use caution. You can put some tape on it if you want it. We don't want to scratch the inside of the barrel, and this doesn't have rifling like a typical like a rifle would. However, we still don't want to induce any scratches that are unnecessary. Run it down to the bolt face and make sure the bolt face is all the way seated. Then use a marker or some tape or whatever you want to mark the cleaning rod. Measure it with the measuring tape. In this case, this one is 19 inches. So if we were going to use this, we would want to cut ½ inch off the barrel. In the case of the other gun, it ended up being about an inch. This is the remnant that was on it. The next part of it is in order to do this right with only using a hacksaw, you really do need to use a fairly large vise or some other surface that would be that will give you a 90 degree to the barrel. In this case, I have a 10-inch American-made vise, and it was used to secure the barrel while we cut it. So let's open the Polychoke. I'll show you a little bit about it, explain a little bit about it. The benefit of the Polychoke is that it's adjustable. You don't need to have multiple chokes with us. If you were going to use this as a survival shotgun, it would be more ideal because you always have about 9 chokes on the end of the gun, without having to carry more. They have different models. Some of them don't have any nothing extravagant at the end that simply ends at what looks like the barrel nut to start with. This one's called the vented model. I don't know if you would consider it quite a muzzle brake or not, or a flash hider. They do have a dedicated flash hider. I think they have a door breacher looking one. Again, they have a plain model. They can run, the plain one runs I think at 83, and then the door breacher I think somewhere around $100. So it's marked on it. This thing rotates, the sleeve rotates, and you just move the dot to whatever choke you want, and they're all marked around the perimeter. This again is a 12 gauge Saiga model. Comes with instructions, everything you need to know about adjusting the choke, and it also comes with this little adjustment wrench that you're going to use to tighten this on the barrel. So let's get going.
Secure the barrel in the vise at the point where you want to make the cut so that the cut is tight to the edge of the jaws. Make sure the barrel is 90 degrees to the edge of the vise in both directions so that the cut is truly straight across and not at an angle. After you've made the cut will go pretty quick if you have a sharp blade on the hacksaw. Just double check it with a flat edge, with a square. Make sure it's where you want to be. You can do some manual filing if you need to. Just double check it a couple different directions to make sure you're at the point where we can move on the threading. Now move the barrel out to the point where you want to thread to. You can measure this off of, you can probably just use a micrometer to measure the inside of the Polychoke, or if you have another barrel nut you can measure it again. I did mine a little bit longer than we had to. Start the die with the thread alignment tool. Here the handle's not shown for clarity. What we want to have is the screw on the split collar tighten down to open the collar up so that you can start the thread. What you'll do is make several passes tightening it each time. Once the thread is cut, you'll need to move the barrel back to the point where we want to file the threads down just to the point where they're gone and we get back to a smooth barrel. Make sure you're filing in a very flat manner and do this very slowly around the perimeter of the barrel. You can use, once you're done, you can use a piece of sandpaper, pull it tight. It puts even pressure on it. It makes it easier to get that surface nice and smooth and even because you basically made multifaceted cuts with the file. Now we can see the end of the barrel. I probably turned mine 8 times with the file and just did a small section at a time and kept it very consistent on how I was making my approaches and made sure that it was even. Install the bottom half of the Polychoke, just making sure that it screws on, it's tight. What you should do when you're threading it is actually check it in between changing the adjustment screws so that you don't overcut it, but you want it to the point where it's easy to thread on. looking in, you want to be able to see the same amount of perimeter where the barrel and the polychoke meet, so that you make sure that your cut was good, that you're not off of center somehow. Again, if you had a lathe, it'd be a whole lot easier to check this. I just chose to use some perma blue. You can get that at any big box store. Um, it's the same finish basically that's on the polychoke. Careful, you can see the note. It is poisonous. I used to use a Q-tip on the edge of the barrel. Once you've blued it, wipe it down with oil, then install the polychoke with a wrench.
So here we are, we're finished. Here's the factory threaded 19-inch. The only difference in these two is that this was parkerized from the factory. Since we cut this down, obviously we were at bare metal, and I elected to cold blue it since the polychoke is only blued itself. I did choose to cut the threads a little bit deeper than the factory one, since the way that these muzzle attachments work is the polychoke tightens against a surface on the inside, and that ensures that the barrel, there's no separation between the barrel and the choke. It's not like an internal choke common on other shotguns. So what we need to make sure is that the end of the muzzle to the transition in the choke is as smooth as possible, so we achieve the results we need. So the installation is very simple. It just simply screws on, and these threads are right hand, unlike the traditional original Kalashnikov 14x1, which was a right hand thread or a left hand thread. We're going to use the wrench, and you can there's also a barrel nut available from Carolina Shooter Supply that will also allow you to tighten back here to make it easier to have a surface that you can unscrew to get the polychoke off a little easier. Some people use Loctite in there. I find if you get it tight enough with the wrench, you usually don't have any problems with it trying to come off. It just tightens down and you're ready to go. The adjustment is as simple as turning the choke to match the desired setting. I hope this helps. Again, if I can do it, you can do it. Get out there, be involved.